Hey everyone, what's up? Uri for Guerrilla Poker, and today we have a hand from the end boss of poker, arguably the greatest of all time, but certainly unarguably the best player in the world for the past few years. Online 6 max as well as heads up. LLinusLLove is considered the GOAT of poker by a lot of the top online players. One of the cool things about studying hands by LLinusLLove is that unlike a lot of other top regs where when I see them do something a bit odd, I'm like, okay, this guy probably messed up. When I see Linus doing something a bit odd, I always think, okay, Linus is more likely to be getting this correct than I am by a fair margin. So this is a place where I can actually learn something new. So without further ado, let's dive into the hand in this video. We're going to have a bit of hand analysis, big pot, and a bit of PioSOLVER analysis to understand what the hell Linus is doing. Is he a genius or did he mess up like a human being? Okay, so we have a heads up hand with some antes, but we're going to ignore those for the purpose of the analysis. Generally, antes just make you play a bit looser, call a bit more, 3-bet a bit less, but nothing that's going to be very relevant for this analysis. So we have a min raise, too small with antes, LLinusLLove 3-bets 5x, and a call. Flop, we have a third pot bet on King 8-5 rainbow. Bet size and type of bet that we discuss a lot, I'll always mention in a few words. This indicates that Linus has a big range advantage, and he does this as kind of a push your equity out before polarizing his own range, and the idea is just to make random stuff that didn't connect fold, and Linus only gets to do this because the board is disconnected in rainbow and he has a fairly big range advantage. So Linus does this, he gets raised 3x and decides to call. Now this raise is uncommon to see. In a lot of formations, this can be a bit incorrect. We'll examine it either way, and even if it's not a high-frequency play, it's an important play to know how to react to. It's a bit difficult, when you bet your entire range, you have to continue fairly wide against these raises, so even if they seem strong, you will have to continue with anything decent that you see bet. Turn ace of spades, Linus checks, we face a small bet, and Linus makes a small raise. Small bet. If I raise flop and I get the ace turn, why would I bet small on the turn? So in my eyes, my flop raising range has some nutted hands, it has some bluffs, and then it has some, we'll call them good enough to stack off or to raise hands, but not very nutted. So stuff like king, queen, or king, jack. King, queen, or king, jack would kind of like to put in a small bet and check behind river. Nutted stuff would like to spread out bets over 3 streets to get more money. So this type of bet does feel like it makes sense for this scenario. We're not really looking for protection. It's not like we need to bet big enough so Linus can't call with his 8-9 of clubs. We don't care, you can call, if we have king jack or 5s. So I think the bet makes sense. Linus is raising, indicating that he is probably beating a king. We get a call, river, Linus shoves for third pot remaining, we get a call and the hands get turned face up. Linus has 6-5 of spades and his opponent has queen 9 of spades. So we have flush over flush on the river, they both made very nutted hands. Queen 9 of spades, aside from, questioning the flop raise, and maybe questioning the turn bet. Obviously, we're going to stack off the river. But I think Linus's hand is the interesting one to look at in this scenario. The thing that stands out to me is that, check raising the turn with 6-5 of spades on this run out, to me intuitively looks crazy. I would honestly never have even considered a play like this. Which begs the question, would I check raise anything here on the turn? Because this kind of small blocker bet by Linus's opponent kind of forces Linus to have a raising range. And here Linus needs to raise hands that beat king, queen, king, jack to get stacks in, otherwise all the king, queen, king, jack go bet turn, check back river. So it's important to have the raising range. Value is, easy to come by. Anything that beats king, queen is good enough for value. Linus is going to have plenty of hands like that. Random ace, jack of hearts or whatever that he floated the flop with, or ace 8, ace 5. But what about bluffs? Now, for me intuitively, I would have picked unpaired bluffs. I'm kind of surprised to see 5-6 of spades bluffing. If this were anyone other than Linus, I'd be like, this feels pretty crazy. What are you trying to do here? Why bluff with this hand? But It's Linus, so we're going to take a look and try to figure things out. Like I said, don't nitpick about the parameters. I don't care about ante. You know, it's a 3-bet pot. It's going to play similar enough. So we have Linus c-betting most of his range. We see the raise happening. Hands like Queen of Spades, 9 of Spades in there. So everything okay so far. Of course, Linus's 6-5 of Spades should always call. It's too strong to fold. You can start folding 6s and 7s. When you have a board pair, you have too many outs to improve against something like top pair, because you have, you know, both 2-pair outs and trip outs. Now, here, just to show you guys, you can see Linus's opponent should raise with King 10, King Jack, King Queen quite often. Here, PioSOLVER actually likes slow playing sets and raising more than 1 pair vulnerable value hands. So we get the Ace of Spades turn, Linus checks, and you can see Linus's opponent using a bet size that makes sense. He can do this with various ace-X that he bluffed with, but also King Jack, King Queen. And when he does this, Linus certainly needs to raise a lot, and we're seeing him raise every single ace in his range. Some 2 pairs as well, and sets. Basically, once his opponent makes a small bet on the ace, Linus is going to take charge of putting in the money. And we're going to see bluffs, and here, you know, personally, I would have thought 6-7 suited, maybe 9-7 of spades. Those type of hands, that's what I would have gone with. But you guys can see PioSOLVER actually taking Linus's hand type, so 8x with a spade or 5x with a spade, and raising it fairly often. You could look at this, I think a lot of guys would be like, okay, wow, this is actually okay. And, you know, whatever random spade river, of course, you're going to shove and be like, okay, Linus played good. But I would like to dig deeper and pause, and this is I think a really important thing when studying with PioSOLVER, and ask, you know, what the hell, how, why is this hand raising? Why is it raising? Because it has the flush draw, and you can see the answer is no. 6-5 of clubs and 6-5 of spades raise just as often. 7-5 of clubs raises more often than 7-5 of spades. 9-5 of clubs and spades both raise, so it's not about the flush draw, it's about the pair. And the question is, why the hell would you check raise a pair? Classic old school poker would be, you know, bluff catchers, bluff catch. If you want to bluff, bluff with your draw. And PioSOLVER is saying, no. If you have an open ender, you check call. If you have a pair, you check raise. And this is really, really unintuitive. Now, once we figure this out, maybe we can use it in different situations. Linus obviously figured this out. Linus hasn't memorized every single spot what to do in every single spot in poker. So Linus knows exactly what to do here. How does he know? How do you know, Linus? I would really recommend, like, pause the video and try to think, why could this possibly be a thing? And what do I want to look at next to figure this out? Try to think about it. Try to think about, what would you look at? How would you approach this? How would you experiment? Well, what do you do here? Maybe our video editor can do a countdown of like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You know, we can make educated guesses, but the best thing to start out is by looking at the betting range. And very, very often you're going to see hints in the betting range of why the hell would you do this. And here are the kind of quote-unquote hints. One would be, Pio's betting 6s, and Pio's betting 7s, and Pio's betting a bit of 9s, and Pio's betting Queen 8. Those hands being in there make me a lot less excited to call with 6-5. I really want to bluff those out. Now, if I had to pick a bluff, I would have picked 6-7 of spades. But given villain is maybe bet folding 6s and bet folding all these like Queen 6 and 10-7, like, it looks like our opponent here, Pio's actually doing something with a bunch of 6s and 7s. To just make you not want to raise 6-7. So there's this kind of meta thing going on. This often happens with solvers. The crazy thing that happened because the solver is doing a different crazy thing. So the natural play would be to check raise 6-7, right? And if you're check raise bluffing 6-7, Pio's like, okay, if this is going to be your check raise bluff, haha, and you're going to call 5x and 8x, I'm going to bluff all of my 6x and 7x on the turn. So when I'm bluffing, you won't have your check raise bluff. More likely to fold, because a check raise bluff obviously beats our bluffs. So, haha, I'll bluff my 6x and 7x, right? Bluff queen 6 and not bluff queen jack. And then, because you're calling 5x and 8x, the spades, I'll bet queen 8. And screw you, man. Look, I'm betting queen 8. You're calling 8-9 of spades and you're gonna lose. So just imagine this kind of leveling war, right? One guy is check raising 6-7 of spades. Then the other guy's like, ah ha ha, screw you, I'm gonna do this and this and that. And the first guy's like, you know, 6-7 of spades doesn't seem so hot anymore. And now that that's out of there and you have all these queen 8s betting and these pocket 9s and pocket 6s, I kind of feel like starting to check raise 5x and 8x myself. And then the out of position player is going to start check raising those as bluffs. And then you're going to have more levels and levels of adjustments, and at the end we reach an equilibrium, and obviously this equilibrium looks like this. In position is bluffing, 6s and 7s, but not all of them. He has queen 8, but not that many combos of queen 8, and there are no other 8s, and this even started on the flop. And then out of position is check raising with a decent amount of 5s and a decent amount of 8s, but not all of them. And he is only check raise bluffing with 6-7 of spades, 9-7 of spades, and 9-7 of clubs. So there's a little bit, everything is mixed. But to understand what happened to get here, you need to understand all these things. And then the question pops up, does Linus understand these things? How is Linus approaching this? Because you could look at this from all sorts of levels. One level would be, when you're check raise bluffing the turn, you pick some draws and some low pairs, and that's just the structure of the range. And maybe that's always a structure of the range. I wouldn't be shocked. Linus is always thinking, okay, what do I bluff with? Like, this is one of the things that Linus is very good at. He does not miss opportunities to bluff. He's gonna bet 3-bet bluff. He's gonna 3-bet 5-bet bluff, post flop, all the spots with bluffs. He's gonna think, what do I bluff with? And this is a recurring pattern. Maybe he's even thinking about blocking sets or whatever. So maybe he's thinking like that. The way I would approach it, and the kind of deconstruction we're doing here, is understand the leveling, the PioSOLVER leveling game that went into building this. And then you ask yourself, how likely is my opponent to not be betting queen jack, jack 10, queen 10? And here you can see not be betting queen 9 of spades, but actually have all of these weird hands, and also have 6s and 7s and queen 8, where that makes me want to check raise my 5s and 8s. Now, you want to guess where your opponent is at in this game. Is he just playing like the solver? If he's playing like the solver, you do whatever. But is he playing like the solver and you're playing like the solver and we're still waiting to find leaks? Or is this a spot that's advanced enough where you're like, you know what? I think most people will not bluff 6s and queen 8 on the turn. They won't have those. They won't bet those. And given I think they won't bet those, I'm not gonna go into this whole war with you. I'm gonna check raise bluff my 6-7. I don't think you are stopping me from doing that in the way that you should be, and just call with 6-5 of spades, which is probably what I would do. Now, we dove into the rabbit hole, we're diving out. If you look at the results of the hand, Linus played perfect, not a big shock. His opponent should probably not have barreled queen 9 of spades on the turn. Certainly not against Linus, who is finding all the correct bluff raises. This is a bit a question of approach, and this is an approach that's very different depending on how high stakes you play. The higher up guys, the top guys in the world in Heads Up No Limit and 6max, a lot of them are trying to play like the solver for a fairly long time before they start deviating. So they will just have these raises, they understand them, they've studied them, like we said, this is a repeating pattern. But as you move lower down in stakes, so if you're like, playing only 5k NL or only 2k NL or only 100 NL, you really have to ask yourself when you're digging into these things, is this something that's ever going to happen? Is my opponent going to punish me for the very intuitive play of check raising 6-7? And if the answer is no, we did some lock here for our opponent playing more normal, check raising 6-7 would be good and check raising 6-5 would be bad. Like, check raising, these check raises only happen because you get this random spot where villain, checks back 6s and checks back queen 8 and just has you crushed. If he doesn't have these and he's more polar, there's really no need. Okay, so hope you guys enjoyed this little dive down the Linus rabbit hole. Linus, extremely, extraordinarily strong technical player. I'm sure he's a very strong exploitative player as well, but he hides what he's doing well enough since he's playing against world-class competition all the time. And yeah, apparently check raising the bottom pair on the turn is a thing. Hopefully you guys understand that the reasons are a bit convoluted and not necessarily necessary for you guys. Personally, I would ignore it. But it's probably a pattern of, when you check raise turns, you take some bottom pairs and throw them in there. I don't know what else to say, guys. Sometimes we understand why it's happening. Personally, I wouldn't do it. But, do it, don't do it. Up to you guys. Hope you enjoyed the video, and see you next time.